The man called me the help before I even got my coat off, and the worst part was not the insult. Not really. It was the way the whole room went quiet for half a breath, looked at me, looked at him, then decided it was safer to laugh. That was the night I learned that some families do not just inherit money, they inherit the confidence to be cruel in public. And what Jasper Wexler did not know, standing there with his champagne glass and that lazy little smile, was that he had just talked himself out of the most expensive handshake of his life. My name is Maya Ellison, and back then I was the founder and CEO of Harborline Analytics, a company I had built out of a rented office above a dry cleaner in Atlanta, where the elevator only worked when it felt emotionally ready and the Wi-Fi had the personality of a tired raccoon. We were not glamorous in the beginning, not even close, but we were good, painfully good, the kind of good you become when nobody expects you to survive and every small win feels like proof that you are not crazy for believing in yourself. By the time this all happened, Harborline had grown into one of the most respected predictive security firms in the country. We worked with hospitals, airports, shipping companies, even a few government contractors who always acted like they were doing us a favor by paying late. And then came the deal with Wexler Global, an $860 million partnership that would have pushed us into another league entirely. The Wexlers were old money, Connecticut old money, the kind of people who owned paintings of ancestors who looked disappointed in electricity. Their estate sat above the water in Greenwich, all gray stone and trimmed hedges and windows, tall enough to make a normal person feel underdressed just standing outside. I remember pulling up that evening in a black town car with my general counsel, Dana Reeves, sitting beside me, quietly reviewing the final terms on her tablet while I stared out at the gravel drive and tried to slow my breathing. Dana was one of those women who could smell trouble through a closed door. 5'4", silver hair, red lipstick, and a courtroom stare that could make a grown man rethink his entire personality. She glanced at me and said, "You ready for rich people theater?" And I laughed because I thought she was joking, which turned out to be optimistic. I was wearing a cream suit that night, simple pearl earrings my mother had given me after my first funding round, and heels I had no business wearing on gravel, but I wanted to look like I belonged there, not because I doubted myself, but because I knew rooms like that were always looking for reasons to doubt me first. When we stepped inside, the house smelled like polished wood, white flowers, and money that had never been asked to explain itself. A string quartet played near the back windows. Waiters moved around with silver trays, and everywhere I looked, there were people smiling with their mouths while their eyes did math. "Who is she?" I saw one woman whisper, and another lean close and whispered back something I could not hear, though her face said enough. I had been in rooms like that before. Rooms where people loved diversity and annual reports but got visibly confused when it walked in wearing a tailored suit and holding signing authority. Still, I kept my smile easy because that was the bargain I had made with myself years earlier. Never let them see the bruise while they are still holding the stick. Walter Wexler, the family patriarch, came toward me from across the marble foyer. Tall, thin, white hair, navy blazer, the kind of man who made silence feel like a management style. He had been polite in every meeting, careful, almost warm, but always with a little distance, as if he respected what I had built without fully believing I had built it. "Maya," he said, extending his hand. "Wonderful to have you here," and I shook it, firm but not theatrical, because women like me learn early that every handshake is apparently a personality test. I was about to thank him for hosting us when a voice floated in from near the fireplace, sharp enough to cut the music in half. "Dad, did catering send someone through the front entrance again?" The words landed softly, almost casually, and that made them uglier. I turned and saw Jasper Wexler, Walter's only son, leaning against the mantel with a champagne flute in one hand and a grin that did not reach his eyes. Jasper was handsome in the way expensive mistakes often are. Blonde hair, perfect teeth, confidence poured over insecurity like too much cologne. He looked right at me, then raised his glass a little higher and said, "No offense, sweetheart, but the staff entrance is around back." A few people laughed, not loudly at first, more like little coughs dressed up as manners, and then a bigger laugh came from a man near the bar who clearly wanted Jasper to like him, and after that the whole room seemed to give itself permission. I remember the sound of it, thin and bright and cowardly. My face got hot, my stomach dropped. Dana shifted beside me, and I felt her anger before I saw it, the way her shoulders squared, the way her jaw tightened. She opened her mouth, but I touched her wrist, just once, because I knew if she spoke first, the story would become about tone, not insult, and I had survived too many rooms like this to hand them that escape hatch. Walter did nothing. That is the part that stayed with me longer than Jasper's words. Walter Wexler, who had sat across from me for months discussing trust, values, partnership, legacy, stood 3 steps away and said absolutely nothing. He looked at his son, then at me, then down into his glass like perhaps there might be courage floating somewhere near the ice. There was a long beat where he could have fixed it. One sentence would have done it. Jasper, apologize. Or even Maya is our guest. But he chose the family name over the human being standing in front of him. And in that choice, he told me everything the legal documents had not. Jasper pushed away from the mantel and strolled closer, enjoying himself now, feeding off the discomfort like it was applause. Relax, he said, lifting one hand. We are all friends here. I am sure Ms. Ellison has a sense of humor. People in tech usually do, right? Lots of beanbags and hoodies and little inspirational slogans on the wall. His friends chuckled. Somebody actually said, "Oh, Jasper, stop," in that useless rich lady way that means please continue, but let me pretend I objected. I looked at him for a moment and I saw exactly what he wanted. He wanted me angry. He wanted me loud. He wanted the room to remember me as difficult, emotional, ungrateful, lucky to have been invited. He wanted to drag me down to the level where his cruelty could look like banter. So I smiled, not a warm smile, not a forgiving smile, just a small, calm one that made his grin twitch at the edges. "Mr. Wexler," I said, "I promise you, I have a wonderful sense of humor. It is just usually more expensive than that." The room went quiet again, but this time the silence had a different flavor. Dana looked down at her tablet to hide a smile. Jasper blinked, and for half a second I saw the boy under the air, spoiled, startled, furious that the toy had talked back. Walter cleared his throat, finally finding his voice now that it was no longer useful. "Maya," he said, "perhaps we should step into the library and discuss the final documents." I looked at him, then at the room, then back at Jasper. "The papers can wait until morning," I said. Walter's face tightened. "Maya, I hope you will not let an unfortunate joke affect months of work." There it was, the first little rewrite, the softening of the blade after the cut had already been made. An unfortunate joke, not a public insult. Not a racial slap wrapped in a country club grin. A joke. I nodded slowly, because when powerful people minimize what happened to you, they are not confused. They are negotiating the price of your silence. I said, "I am not making any decisions tonight." Then I turned to the waiter nearest me, a young Latino man holding a tray of champagne with both hands, trying very hard to look invisible. He had seen the whole thing. His eyes met mine for just a second, and I saw something there that almost broke me. Not pity, not exactly. More like recognition. Like he knew that laugh. Like maybe he had carried it home before. I took a glass from his tray, not because I wanted it, but because my hand needed something steady to do, and I said, "Thank you," with the kind of care people in that room usually reserved for donors and judges. Then I set the glass untouched on a side table, gave Walter Wexler a polite nod, and walked out. My heels sounded ridiculous on that marble floor, sharp and clean and louder than the quartet, and nobody stopped me. That is how these rooms work. They will watch a person get humiliated, then watch her leave, then call the whole thing unfortunate over dessert. Outside, the night air hit my face cold and salty from the water. I stood at the top of the steps and breathed like I had been underwater. Dana came out behind me, furious enough to scare the valet. She said, "We can bury them in this contract by breakfast." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because Dana's version of comfort involved legal strategy and emotional violence in alphabetical order. I said, "No, not tonight." She softened then, just a little. "Maya," she said, "are you okay?" That question nearly did what Jasper could not. My throat closed. I looked back at the house, glowing warm against the dark lawn. All those people inside pretending nothing had happened, and suddenly I was 20 years old again, standing in a university seminar room while a professor asked if I was sure I belonged in the advanced economics section. I was 26 again, pitching to investors who kept asking if my technical co-founder would be joining, even after I told them 3 times that the architecture was mine. I was 32 again, listening to a client tell me I was surprisingly articulate, as if my vocabulary had jumped a fence to be there. Those moments do not disappear. They stack up quietly inside you like unpaid bills. And every now and then, someone like Jasper Wexler says one careless thing, and the whole pile comes due. In the car back to the hotel, my phone started buzzing before we made it through the gates. First my chief operating officer, then 2 board members, then our communications director, then a text from my mother that just said, "Baby, call me when you can." The rumor had already escaped the house because rumors in wealthy circles travel faster than guilt. By the time I reached my suite, 3 people had told 3 different versions of the same story, and in all of them I was either too sensitive, too proud, or too strategic. Funny how that works. A man humiliates you in public and suddenly everyone becomes an expert and how gracefully you should absorb it. I kicked off my shoes, sat on the edge of the bed, and listened to the voicemails pile up. Our board chair, Elaine Porter, sounded calm in the way people sound calm when they are standing near a financial cliff. Maya, we need to discuss this before markets open. Why? We need to discuss this before markets open. Cannot allow a social incident to jeopardize an $860 million partnership. A social incident. I stared at the wall and said out loud to nobody, my God, they've already put it in a little coffin. Dana stayed in the sitting room on her laptop reading messages, building a timeline, preparing for war whether I wanted one or not. Around midnight, my COO, Marcus Bell, called and I answered because Marcus had been with me since the ugly office above the dry cleaner, back when our conference table was a folding table with one suspicious leg. He did not start with money. He said, I am sorry. Just that. 2 words. And after a night full of people trying to manage me, those 2 words almost felt holy. I thanked him, and for a while neither of us said anything. Then he sighed and said, you know the board is going to push hard. I said, I know. He said, they will say employees are counting on this. I said, they will say employees are counting on this. I said, they will. He said, they will say employees are noti the company. I said, they are. He said, they will say Jasper is not the company. I said, his father made him the cut quite it. Then he said, what do you want to do? That was the question nobody else had asked me. Not what can we salvage, not how do we spin it, not how do we keep the money clean after the insult. What do you want to do? I walked to the window and looked down at the city lights along the water. Little gold sparks trembling in the dark, and I thought about my staff back in Atlanta. Engineers who had pulled all-nighters for this deal. Analysts who had pulled vacations. Young managers who had told their families this partnership would change everything. I thought about responsibility, real responsibility, not the corporate brochure kind. And then I thought about that waiter holding the tray, trying to disappear while rich people laughed at a woman they thought had wandered into the wrong door. I thought about every young person who would see me swallow it and learn, quietly, that the price of success is letting powerful people name your worth. I told Marcus, I do not know yet, but I know what I cannot do. I cannot walk back into that house like nothing happened. He exhaled, heavy. Then get some sleep, he said, though we both knew I would not. Around 3 in the morning, I called my mother. She answered on the first ring, because mothers do not sleep when their children are bleeding, even when the wound is invisible. I told her the whole thing. I tried to keep my voice steady, but somewhere around Walter looking into his glass instead of defending me, I cracked. My mother listened without interrupting. Then she said, Maya, when your grandfather opened his repair shop in Savannah, men used to come in and ask for the owner while he was standing right there with grease on his hands and the keys to the building in his pocket. He would smile and say, you found him. Then he would charge them full price. I laughed through tears. She said, but listen to me, baby. Dignity is not pride. Pride is loud. Dignity is what is still standing after the noise is gone. So before you decide anything, make sure you are protecting the right one. I wrote that down on hotel stationery because I knew if I did not, the night would steal it from me. Dignity is not pride. By sunrise, I had not slept. I had read every clause of the Wexler agreement twice. Stared at my own reflection in the dark window, answered no one except Dana and Marcus, and watched the sky turn pale over the harbor. At 7:15, I walked into an emergency board call wearing the same cream suit from the night before, because sometimes you do not change armor in the middle of a fight. 12 faces filled the screen. Elaine looked exhausted. One board member was drinking coffee like it had personally betrayed him. Another had the grave expression of a man about to defend a bad idea with confidence. Elaine began gently, which is how I knew it would be bad. Maya, everyone here respects what you experienced, but we have a fiduciary duty to consider the company's future. I said, I agree. She continued, Walter Wexler has offered to speak privately and smooth this over. Smooth this over. Those words did something to me. Not anger exactly. Clarity. I asked, did he offer a public apology? Elaine hesitated. Not yet. Did Jasper? Another pause. Their position is that emotions were high and comments may have been misinterpreted. Dana, sitting beside me off camera, whispered, there it is. I leaned toward the screen. Misinterpreted by whom? Nobody answered, so I helped them. Because I was the one standing there. Because I was the one he looked at when he said the staff entrance was around back. Because I was the one he looked at when he said the staff entrance was around back. Because I was the one your future partner chose to degrade in a room full of witnesses. A board member named Preston Vale raised his hand, though this was not third grade and I had not called on him. Maya, he said, with the careful patience of a man explaining rain to a cloud. No one is defending the remark, but leaders sometimes have to absorb discomfort for the greater good. I smiled a little. Preston, I have absorbed discomfort in rooms you would not last 10 minutes in. That is not leadership. That is survival. And I did not build this company just so we could become impressive survivors. The call went dead quiet. Elaine rubbed her forehead. Another board member jumped in, warning about valuation, market confidence, employee bonuses, investor trust. He was not wrong about the numbers. That was the irritating part. The money was real. The risk was real. Walking away would hurt. It might hurt badly. But some risks show up wearing dollar signs, and some show up years later as shame. I listened until everyone had said their piece, then I told them the truth. I said, if this partnership requires me to pretend public humiliation is private inconvenience, then it is already rotten at the center. I will not ask our employees to build their future on a foundation where respect is optional and silence is billable. Elaine said, Maya, are you saying you want to terminate? I looked at Dana. She gave me the smallest nod, not permission, just solidarity. I looked back at the screen and said, I am saying Harborline is withdrawing from the Wexler Global Partnership, effective immediately, and I will take full responsibility for the consequences. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the room erupted. Voices overlapping, warnings, objections, someone saying this is reckless, someone else saying we need more time. But underneath all of it, I felt strangely calm, the kind of calm that comes when the worst thing has already happened and you are still standing. I ended the call before they could talk me into betraying myself politely. Dana closed her laptop and said, well, that was either the bravest thing I have ever seen, or we are both about to become motivational speakers at airport hotels. I laughed for the first time in 12 hours. Then my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It was a video file. No text, just a video. Dana and I stared at it. Something in my chest tightened. I tapped play, and there it was, the Wexler ballroom, the fireplace, the champagne glass. Jasper's voice clear as a bell. Dad did catering. Send someone through the front entrance again. Then his smile. Then the line about the staff entrance. Then the laughter. All of it captured from behind a tray of champagne by someone standing close enough to see Walter Wexler look down and choose silence. When the video ended, neither of us spoke. Then Dana whispered, Maya, who sent this? When the video ended, neither of us. I looked at the unknown number, then back at Jasper's frozen face on the screen. And I knew with a cold certainty that made the morning feel suddenly electric, that the story was no longer trapped inside that room. I watched that video 3 times before I realized I had been holding my breath. Not because it surprised me. I had been there. I had felt every second of it in my bones. But because seeing it from the outside made it worse somehow, colder, undeniable. There was Jasper in his perfect suit, saying the words with that careless little grin, and there was Walter Wexler, the great man, the respected man, the man whose family name had opened doors for a century, lowering his eyes like the floor had suddenly become fascinating. Dana took the phone from me gently, the way you take matches away from somebody standing near gasoline, and said, we need to verify the sender before we do anything. I nodded. A part of me already knew what I wanted to do, which was nothing, not because I was afraid, but because I had not asked for a public execution. I had asked for basic respect. Funny how people act like those two things are somehow equally dramatic. Dana sent the file to our digital forensics team, and within 20 minutes Marcus called, his voice low and tense. It is real, he said. Metadata is stripped, but the footage is clean. No obvious edits. It is real, he said. Metadata is stripped, but the footage is clean. I sat down slowly at the hotel desk and looked at the pale morning light coming through the curtains. So now what? Marcus paused. Maya, it is already online. At first I thought I misheard him. What do you mean already online? He exhaled. Someone posted it 15 minutes ago from an anonymous account. It has 40,000 views. No, wait, 72,000. Dana leaned over her laptop, cursed under her breath, and opened the link. There it was, my worst moment of the night. Dressed up in a caption for the world to judge. Old money air mistakes. Black CEO for staff after she arrives to sign $860 million deal. That was the caption. Short, brutal, efficient. The internet does not always understand nuance, but it knows blood in the water when it sees it. By 8:30, it had passed 500,000 views. By 9, every business reporter with a ring light and a strong opinion was calling our communications office. By 10, a cable news panel had already frozen Jasper's face on screen and was asking whether Wexler Global had a culture problem, which was a polite television way of asking whether the rot had finally become visible. I had not even finished my second cup of coffee, and people I had never met were calling me brave, angry, graceful, strategic, petty, inspirational, divisive, and my personal favorite, suspiciously calm. Apparently, when a woman does not collapse on schedule, it makes people nervous. Around 10:15, Elaine called again, and this time she did not sound calm. "Maya, this is moving fast," I said. "I noticed. The board is concerned that our withdrawal will now be interpreted as a public accusation." "Elaine," I said, "I was publicly accused of not belonging in a room where I was the highest value person present." There was silence. Then she said, "That is not what I meant." "I know," I said, "but it is what happened." Dana, still reading updates, suddenly turned her laptop toward me. Wexler Global had released a statement. It was the kind of statement corporations produce when they want to apologize without bending any part of the spine. Wexler Global values inclusion, respect, and partnership. We are aware of a video circulating online that appears to show a private social interaction taken out of context. We regret any offense that may have been felt and are reviewing the matter internally. I read it once, then again, and laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes language becomes so cowardly it loops around into comedy. Any offense that may have been felt, as if offense were a weather pattern drifting through the ballroom, as if nobody had actually opened his mouth and poured it into the room. Dana said, "They are going to try to make the video of the problem, not the behavior." Of course they were. That is what people with power do when truth escapes without permission. They call it a leak, a breach, a misunderstanding, anything but evidence. By noon, the hashtag was everywhere. Not the staff entrance. It started as a joke, then became a protest, then became one of those phrases people print on mugs before anyone has had time to ask whether mugs are appropriate. Videos popped up from nurses, software engineers, restaurant managers, professors, flight attendants, women in boardrooms, men in warehouses, people telling stories that sounded different on the surface but had the same bruise underneath. I was told I did not look like the manager. I was told I did not look like the manager. I was asked whose assistant I was. I was followed in my own office. I was mistaken for security at the conference where I was the keynote speaker. One woman said, "I watched that clip and heard every room that ever laughed at me. That one made me close the laptop." I had spent the morning trying to make this about one contract, one insult, one entitled man with a champagne glass, but the truth was bigger and more uncomfortable. Jasper had not created that room. He had simply trusted it to protect him, and for a long time it had. At Wexler Global headquarters in Manhattan, things were apparently less poetic and more on fire. Marcus had friends in finance, and finance people gossip like church ladies with Bloomberg terminals, so details came in piece by piece. Their investor relations team was getting hammered. 3 institutional shareholders demanded a call. 2 major clients paused contract renewals. A European partner sent a formal concern letter, which is corporate language for "please stop bleeding" near our logo. By market close, Wexler Global was down 9%. Not fatal, not yet, but enough to make every person with a corner office suddenly discover a deep personal commitment to accountability. Meanwhile, Jasper Wexler did what men like Jasper often do when the first consequence arrives. He called himself the victim. I know this because he called me, not directly at first. His assistant called Dana, asking whether I would be available for a private conversation with Mr. Wexler. Dana asked, "Which Mr. Wexler?" The assistant hesitated, then said, "Jasper." Dana looked at me and mouthed, "Absolutely not." I said, "Put it on speaker." Jasper came on the line sounding irritated, not sorry, as if the real inconvenience here was that his schedule now included consequences. "Maya," he said, "I think we can both agree this has gotten out of hand." I said nothing. He continued, "Look, if my joke landed poorly, fine, I regret that, but this online mob thing is dangerous. You of all people should understand how quickly narratives get distorted." I looked at Dana. Her eyebrows had climbed so high they were basically applying for asylum in her hairline. I said, "Jasper, what exactly are you apologizing for?" He sighed. "I just said I regret the joke landing poorly." "No," I said, "you regret the landing." "I am asking about the throw." There was a pause. Then his voice hardened. "You know, my family was prepared to make you very rich." I smiled, slowly, because there, it was, naked at last. Not partnership. Perhaps respect. Or earnest. "Jasper," I said, "my company was already valuable before you learned my name. You did not make me." He laughed once, sharp and ugly. "Do not kid yourself. Deals like this do not come around twice. Maybe not, I said, but people like you come around every week, and I have survived all of them. Dana covered her mouth, and I could tell she was enjoying herself in an unprofessional but spiritually correct way. Jasper lowered his voice. If you keep pushing this, it will damage you too. People will start asking why the video came out right after you withdrew. They will say you planned it. They will say you used race to get leverage. They will say a lot of things. For the first time that day, I felt real anger. Not hot, not wild, but clean and focused. Jasper, I said, listen carefully, because I am only going to say this once. I did not record you. I did not post that video. I did not force you to confuse cruelty with charm in a room full of witnesses. Whatever happens next was not caused by my reaction. It was caused by your behavior. Then I hung up. Dana stared at me. I stared back. Then we both started laughing. That exhausted, almost hysterical laugh people have when the elevator drops and somehow stops 2 inches above disaster. But the laughter did not last because within the hour, Jasper went on offense. Anonymous accounts began posting that I had staged the whole thing, that Harborline was in financial trouble, that I had used the Wexler dinner to create a publicity stunt, that I was difficult to work with, that I had a history of playing the victim, which was news to me because most of my history involved playing the overprepared professional, so nobody could accuse me of needing sympathy. Someone leaked an old photo of me from college at a protest and tried to make it look sinister, as if holding a handmade sign at 19 was evidence of corporate sabotage at 41. Dana's team traced some of the amplification to a crisis firm Wexler had used before. Nothing we could prove publicly yet, but enough to know the smear campaign had a budget. Marcus wanted us to respond hard. Elaine wanted us to respond carefully. My mother wanted me to eat something, which in hindsight was the most practical strategy suggested all day. By evening, we held our own press briefing from Harborline's Atlanta office. I flew back on a private charter offered by one of our investors, though I spent the entire flight feeling guilty about how nice the snacks were. The office was packed when I arrived, not with reporters yet, but with employees. They lined the hallway, pretending to be busy, pretending they had not all watched the clip, pretending their eyes were not full of things they did not know how to say at work. A young data analyst named Priya stepped forward and handed me a cup of tea from the break room. It was oversteeped and somehow tasted like cardboard and cinnamon, and I almost cried because it was perfect. She said, "We are with you," just 4 words. But in that moment, they weighed more than $860 million. In the conference room, Marcus briefed me on the press plan. "Keep it short," he said. "No legal threats, no personal attacks." Dana, naturally, objected to the no legal threats part on moral grounds. I told them I did not want to turn the briefing into a courtroom. I wanted to tell the truth and leave room for people to recognize it. At 6 o'clock, I walked to the podium. Cameras clicked. Reporters shouted over each other. My reflection glowed faintly in the black lenses. Calm on the outside, Pulse doing parkour on the inside. I began without notes. Last night I was invited to the Wexler estate to finalize a partnership. Instead, I was publicly insulted by the company's heir while senior leadership stood by in silence. This morning, Harborline withdrew from that partnership. We did not post the video that is now circulating. We did not ask for this moment to become public, but now that it has, I will not pretend the issue was the video. The issue was what the video revealed. The room settled. I could feel the shift. Reporters know when someone is performing and when someone is simply tired of making pain sound polite. I continued. Harborline was built by people who have been underestimated, overlooked, talked over, and still delivered excellent work. We are not perfect, but we know what we stand for. We will not build our future with partners who treat dignity as a negotiable line item. A reporter near the front raised her hand. Ms. Ellison, critics are saying walking away from a deal this large may hurt your employees. How do you respond to that? I looked toward the back of the room, where several of my employees stood near the glass wall. I said, my employees deserve growth, opportunity, and financial security. They also deserve leadership that does not teach them to swallow disrespect for access. The cost of a deal is not always written in the contract. Another reporter asked whether I believed Jasper's comment was racist. I paused, because I knew the clip would become even louder the moment I answered. I said, I believe his words came from a belief that someone who looks like me was more likely to be serving the room than leading the deal. People can decide what to call that. My job is to decide what I will tolerate. That sentence ran everywhere. By midnight, it had been clipped, captioned, debated, praised, mocked, stitched, misquoted, and printed over my face in fonts I would never have approved. My job is to decide what I will tolerate. People loved it because it sounded strong. What they did not see was me sitting alone in my office after the lights went off, shoes kicked under the desk, head in my hands, wondering whether strength always had to feel so lonely. That is the part nobody tells you about public courage. It looks clean from far away. Up close, it is messy, expensive, and it keeps asking for receipts. The next morning, Wexler Global dropped 18% in the first 2 hours of trading. Their board called an emergency meeting. News helicopters filmed protesters gathering outside their Manhattan headquarters, some carrying signs that said, "Not the staff entrance," others chanting, "Dignity is not for sale." I watched the footage with Marcus and Dana in our war room, which was really just conference room B with too much coffee and 3 extension cords violating safety codes. Marcus said, "They are going to sacrifice Jasper." I said, "Walter will not allow it." Dana shook her head. "Walter will allow anything that keeps the family name breathing." She was right. At 2:12 that afternoon, Wexler Global announced that Jasper Wexler would be stepping back from all operational duties pending an independent review. The statement thanked him for his years of service, which was generous, since as far as anyone could tell, his service mostly involved appearing in photos near ribbon cuttings. The announcement did not satisfy anyone. Protesters called it theater. Investors called it insufficient. Jasper called it betrayal, according to someone who leaked audio from inside the boardroom. And yes, by that point the Wexlers were leaking like an old basement in hurricane season. In the audio, Jasper's voice cracked with rage. "This is my family's company. You cannot do this to me." Then an older voice, believed to be board chair Malcolm Greer, replied, "You did this to the company." That clip went viral too, because apparently the internet had decided Jasper's downfall needed a soundtrack. But while Wexler burned in public, something unexpected started happening in private. My assistant, Lena, came into my office with a look I'd not seen since the day we found out our first big client had paid the invoice on time. She held up her tablet and said, "You need to see the inbox." I braced myself for threats. Instead, it was proposals, dozens of them. First from a hospital network that had been circling us for months, then a major logistics company, then a Canadian infrastructure firm, then a global insurance group. By the end of the day, we had received 17 serious inquiries from companies that had previously moved slowly, politely, cautiously, the way big companies move when they respect your product but are waiting for someone else to validate your existence. Now suddenly everyone wanted to talk about values. I was not naive. Some of them were chasing good press. Some wanted to attach themselves to the moment while the moment was still warm, but some were different. Some had done their homework. One message came from Rebecca Sloan, CEO of Meridian Health Systems, a woman I had admired for years. Her note was short. "Maya, we were impressed with your technology before this week. We are impressed with your leadership now. If you are open to it, I would like to discuss a partnership built on mutual respect from the first conversation, not added later by the legal team." I read that line twice. Then I sent it to Marcus. He replied, "Is it weird that I want to frame this?" I replied, "Yes," he said, still doing it emotionally. 3 days later, Rebecca flew to Atlanta. No ballroom, no string quartet, no champagne, no ancestors judging electricity from oil paintings. She came to our office, wore a navy blazer, asked smart questions, listened to the engineers, and when she met Priya, she knew her name because she had read the project notes. That should not have felt revolutionary. But after Wexler, basic respect felt like luxury service. We sat in the small conference room where the air conditioner made a clicking sound every 7 minutes, and Rebecca said, "I do not want a symbolic deal. I want a real one. Your platform can help us protect patient data across 6 states. We need it. And frankly, I would rather partner with a company that knows what it costs to stand for something." I looked at her for a long moment. "What it costs," I said, "is usually higher than people think." She nodded. "Then let us pay fairly." Dana, who had been quietly reviewing the preliminary terms, looked up like she had just heard music. Over the next 2 weeks, one serious conversation became 4, then 4 became a coalition. Meridian Health, Atlas Port Authority, Northbridge Mutual, 2 international partners I could not announce yet. Together, the projected value exceeded the Wexler deal, not in one flashy number, not in a headline built for champagne, but in durable, diversified contracts with organizations that actually needed what we did and did not require me to leave my self-respect at the service entrance. The board changed its tone with impressive speed. Preston, the man who had advised me to absorb discomfort for the greater good, sent an email praising my principled leadership. I printed it out and showed Dana, who said, "Do not frame that one. It may attract pests." Elaine called to apologize, a real apology, not a corporate fog machine. She said, "I was scared, Maya. I saw the money first. I should have seen you. That one I accepted. Fear makes people small sometimes. The question is whether they stay there." Meanwhile, Jasper disappeared from public view, but not from my life. His lawyer sent a letter accusing Harborline of reputational interference, which Dana described as a cry for help in legal costume. We responded with 12 pages of documented facts and one sentence that Dana was especially proud of. Truthful public reaction to recorded conduct is non-interference, it is consequence. She read it aloud twice, just to enjoy herself. But then, on a Friday evening when I thought the worst of the week had finally passed, I received another message from an unknown number. This one had no video. Just a single sentence. You do not know what Walter covered up to protect Jasper. I stared at it for a long time. The office quiet around me. The city outside turning gold in the late light. Dana had gone home. Marcus was downstairs giving an interview he had tried to avoid for 2 hours. For the first time since the ballroom, the air felt still. Then the phone buzzed again. A file appeared. Board minutes, internal emails, settlement records, names I recognized, dates going back years. My hands went cold as I opened the first document and saw a pattern far darker than one insult at a party. Jasper had not made one mistake. He had been protected through many. Employees paid off. Complaints buried. Partners pressured into silence. And at the bottom of nearly every chain, there was Walter Wexler, calm, careful, respectable Walter, choosing the family name again and again and again. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, because I understood then that this story was not about me anymore. Maybe it never had been. It was about a machine built to protect the powerful from the people they harmed. And now, somehow, that machine had rolled its blueprints right onto my desk. I sat there with those files open on my screen until the office lights clicked off by themselves, because apparently even the building had healthier boundaries than I did. The first document was a settlement agreement from 6 years earlier, signed by a former Wexler global project manager named Nora Keene, and the language was so clean it made the whole thing feel dirtier. Mutual separation, confidentiality, no admission of wrongdoing, continued respect between the parties. All those polished little phrases companies use when what they really mean is, please take this money and disappear quietly. Then came another file, and another, and another. Complaints from assistants, analysts, vendors, a security supervisor, two hospitality workers who had staffed private Wexler events, people whose names had never made headlines because the machine had swallowed them before they could reach the door. Some complaints were about Jasper, some about other executives, some about a culture where cruelty was treated like a family tradition and silence was treated like loyalty. Walter was everywhere, not always as the loudest person in the room. Men like Walter rarely need to be loud, but as the final signature, the careful approval, the calm instruction to handle it discreetly, the man behind the curtain making sure the curtain never moved. I remember whispering, "Oh my God," and it came out like a prayer and a curse at the same time. My first instinct was not triumph. I wish I could say it was, because that would make me sound bolder, cleaner, more like the kind of woman people were suddenly quoting online. But the truth is, I felt sick. It is one thing to stand up for yourself after someone humiliates you. It is another thing to realize your humiliates you. It is another thing to realize your humiliation was just the one mistake they made in front of a camera. I called Dana. It was almost 9 at night. She answered with, "If you are calling to tell me you opened another mysterious file without me, I am retiring immediately." I said, "Dana, you need to come back." Her voice changed. She was at the office in 20 minutes, wearing sneakers with her suit pants and carrying a paper bag from the Thai place downstairs, because even in a constitutional crisis, Dana believed in noodles. She read in silence. That was how I knew it was bad. Dana was a woman who could narrate a parking ticket like a murder trial, but that night she barely spoke. Every few minutes she would stop, press her fingers to her lips, then keep reading. Marcus came in around 10, still wearing the expression of a man who had survived live television by sheer will and caffeine. By midnight, the three of us had built a timeline across the conference table. Documents printed, dates circled, names linked with a red marker, Wexler Global's beautiful reputation slowly turning into something ugly under fluorescent lights. Marcus leaned back and said, "This is bigger than Jasper." Dana nodded. "This is a pattern," I said. "No, this is a system." And there was the word that changed everything. System. Because a pattern can be dismissed as coincidence. A system has architects. We did not release anything that night. That mattered to me. Maybe people wanted me to grab a match and burn the whole Wexler house down while the internet cheered from the sidewalk. But real lives were in those papers. Real people had signed those agreements. Maybe because they needed the money. Maybe because they were scared. Maybe because they had families and mortgages and could not afford to become symbols in someone else's war. So the next morning before sunrise, Dana contacted an outside law firm that specialized in whistleblower protection and corporate misconduct. Marcus contacted our board, and for once, nobody told me to absorb discomfort for the greater good. Elaine simply said, "What do you need?" I said, "Time, discretion, and no leaks from our side." She said, "You have it." I could hear the shame in her voice, and I did not comfort. That may sound cold, but I had learned something that week. Women like me are often expected to make everyone feel better about what they failed to see. I was done doing that for free. By 10 that morning, Dana had found Nora Keene. She lived outside Providence, worked for a nonprofit, and according to Dana, sounded like someone who had been waiting 6 years for a phone call she also dreaded. We did not ask her to speak publicly. We asked if she wanted to talk privately with counsel present. She agreed, but only if we came to her. So the next day, Dana and I flew north, rented a plain gray sedan at the airport, and drove through rain to a small house with yellow porch lights and a basketball hoop leaning crookedly over the driveway. Nora opened the door before we knocked. She was in her late 40s, small, tired eyes, hair pulled back, the kind of face that had learned not to react too quickly. We sat at her kitchen table while rain tapped the windows, and her old dog snored under a chair like he had seen enough human nonsense for one lifetime. Nora told us she had reported Jasper after he sabotaged a colleague's promotion, then mocked her in front of clients when she objected. She said the official story was performance issues. The unofficial message was simpler. Take the settlement, sign the paper, and do not test people who can ruin your references. Walter never threatened me directly, she said, stirring tea she never drank. That was the thing about him. He made you feel like the threat had already happened and you were just catching up. I asked why she stayed silent. The question came out softer than it looks written down. Nora looked at me, not angry, just weary. Because I had a son in college and a husband with cancer, and because everyone loves a whistleblower after somebody else pays the first price. That line followed me home. Everyone loves a whistleblower after somebody else pays the first price. Over the next 10 days, more people came forward. Not publicly at first, but quietly, carefully, like birds testing the air after a storm. Tomas Alvarez, the waiter who had filmed the ballroom video, was one of them. He was 28. Worked events while finishing nursing school, and had sent the video to a friend after Jasper's team tried to identify and fire the staff member who recorded it. He had not meant to start a national scandal. He told me that when Jasper said the line about the staff entrance, he thought of his mother, who had cleaned offices for 20 years and used to enter buildings through back doors even when she had keys. I just got tired, he said. That was it. No grand speech, no heroic music, just tired. People underestimate how many revolutions begin with someone being tired. Meanwhile, Wexler Global was rotting in public. Their stock had not recovered. Clients were pausing contracts so fast their communications department could have used a traffic light. Jasper had been suspended, but nobody believed that was enough, especially after several reporters started sniffing around the old settlements. Walter appeared on television with a face arranged into humility and said, "We are listening. We are learning. We are committed to accountability." I watched from my office couch with Dana and Marcus. Dana ate pretzels with the fury of a woman personally offended by weak statements. Marcus said, "He looks like a man apologizing to a golf course." Walter continued, "Recent events do not reflect who we are." I almost threw a pillow at the screen, because that was the lie. Recent events reflected exactly who they were. That was the problem. The question was whether the world would look long enough to see it. 3 days later, the investigative story broke. Not from us, not from Harborline. The documents had reached a reporter named Celeste Grant, a financial journalist known for being polite right up until the moment she removed your spine in print. I still do not know who sent her the full packet. Maybe the same person who sent it to me. Maybe Nora. Maybe someone inside Wexler who finally decided the ship was sinking and morality made a convenient lifeboat. Celeste's article landed on a Monday morning at 6:01 a.m., which should be illegal because no one deserves that much truth before coffee. The headline was simple: Inside Wexler Global's Culture of Silence. By 6:30, every major outlet had picked it up. By 7:15, Walter Wexler's name was trending above Jasper's. By 8:15, Walter Wexler's name was trending above Jasper's. By 8, the board had announced a second emergency meeting. And by noon, Walter Wexler, the man who could not find one sentence to defend me in his own ballroom, resigned as chairman of Wexler Global. I wish I could tell you I felt joy. I felt something, But joy is too simple a word. I felt relief, sadness, anger, vindication, and a strange hollow quiet. Watching a powerful man fall does not undo the damage he allowed. It does not give Nora back 6 years. It does not years back 6 non-years. It does not give Nora's flower back peas and fake. But it does do one thing. It proves the machine is not magic. It is built by people, protected by people, and sometimes, finally, stopped by people. That afternoon, Jasper tried one last time to save himself. He released a video from what appeared to be a study in one of the Wexler homes, because of course, even his apology had better wood paneling than most people's dream house. He looked pale, angry behind the eyes, and coached within an inch of his life. He said he reflected deeply. He said his words did not represent his values. He said he was committed to growth. He said Maya Ellison deserved respect. The internet noticed he never said he was sorry to Tomas or Nora or any of the employees named in the investigation. Dana watched it and said, that apology has been dry cleaned. Marcus said, do we respond? I said, no, not everything deserves oxygen. But then a reporter asked me about it outside our office the next day. Ms. Ellison, do you accept Jasper Wexler's apology? Cameras pushed close. A car horn blared somewhere behind me. I could have given a neat answer, the kind communications people love, gracious, firm, forgettable. Instead, I thought of my mother's words, dignity is not pride. So I said, forgiveness is personal. Accountability is public. I'm not interested in performing either one for cameras. What matters now is whether the people harmed by that company are heard, protected, and made whole. Then I walked inside before they could turn my face into another debate panel. That line became the second quote people used everywhere, though some people hated it. They said I was unforgiving. They said I wanted revenge. They said Jasper had lost enough. Lost enough. That phrase fascinated me. People are very quick to measure the suffering of powerful men once consequences begin, but they rarely measure the years of quiet damage that made those consequences necessary. Still, I understood why the debate caught fire. Some people saw Jasper as a spoiled heir finally exposed. Others saw a man being destroyed for words. Some thought Walter's resignation was justice. Others thought it was mob rule in a nicer suit. And me, I stood in the middle of it, knowing the truth was both more complicated and more obvious than anyone wanted it to be. He was not destroyed for one sentence. He was revealed by one sentence. He was revealed by one sentence. There's a difference. The weeks that followed were some of the strangest of my life. Arborline signed the Meridian Partnership first, then Atlas, then Northbridge. We did not get one giant $860 million headline. We got something better. A future that did not depend on one family deciding whether my dignity was inconvenient. Our employees got bonuses that year. Priya led a major deployment and later told me she had stopped shrinking her name in meetings. Marcus finally replaced the conference room air conditioner, which may not sound symbolic, but trust me, after 3 summers of that clicking noise, it felt like liberation. Dana became mildly famous after a legal podcast quoted her line about truth and consequence, and she pretended to hate it while sending the link to everyone she had ever met. My mother visited the office in Atlanta and walked through it slowly, touching the backs of chairs, looking at the people working, smiling like she could see my grandfather's repair shop somewhere inside all those screens and glass walls. She hugged me in my office and said, "You look tired." I said, "I am." She said, "Good, means you did not sleep through your own life." Mothers have a way of making exhaustion sound like wisdom. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a leadership forum in Chicago. I almost said no because by then I was tired of being turned into a lesson. People kept calling me a symbol, and symbols do not get to have bad moods or late bills or days when they eat cereal over the sink and wonder if they handled everything wrong. But Rebecca Sloan convinced me to go. She said, "You do not have to inspire anyone, just tell the truth in your own voice." So I did. The auditorium was full, mostly business students, young founders, mid-level managers, people in suits that still had price tags hidden in the sleeves, people hungry for a map and terrified the map might cost them too much. I stood at the podium and did not give them a speech about winning. I told them about the ballroom. I told them about the silence. I told them about the board call and the fear and the money and the way your hands shake after you make the right decision, because right does not always feel peaceful at first. I told them about Nora and Tomas without using details that were not mine to spend. I told them, be careful when people ask you to be practical, because sometimes practical means letting them keep the world exactly as it is. But also be careful with anger, because anger can light the road to burn down your own house. Learn the difference. The room was quiet. Not bored quiet. Listening quiet. I said, I did not walk away from Wexler because I am fearless. I walked away because I was afraid of what staying would teach me about myself. That was the truest sentence I had. At the end, a young man stood up during questions. He looked nervous, twisting the paper program in his hands. He said, my father runs a small company, and he says sometimes you have to take disrespect to keep people employed. Were you ever afraid your decision would hurt the people depending on you? I said, every minute. He looked surprised. I continued, that is the part leadership books leave out. Values are easy when they are free. The test is when good people might pay for them with you. So, no, I do not think every person in every situation can walk away from every bad room. Life is not that clean. But if you have power, real power, and you still choose silence because it is convenient, then you are not protecting your people. You are training them to accept less than they deserve. Afterward, an older janitor stopped me near the side hallway. He had been cleaning the building during the event, and he waited until the crowd thinned. He said, my wife made me watch that video. I thought it was just rich folks acting stupid. Then I saw the way you said thank you to the waiter. He paused, embarrassed. That part got me. I did not know anyone had noticed. I carried that comment longer than any headline, because maybe the real story was never the insult, or the money, or the downfall. Maybe it was that tiny moment between two people in a room designed to make both of them feel small. 1 year after the Wexler dinner, Harborline moved into a new headquarters, still in Atlanta, because I refused to let anyone convince me that success required abandoning the city that raised us. The new office had good elevators, excellent Wi-Fi, and a lobby wall with no inspirational slogans because I had suffered enough. On opening day, our employees brought their families. Kids ran between desks. Someone's grandmother inspected the snack bar like a health official. Dana gave a toast that started legally and ended emotionally, which made everyone uncomfortable in the best way. Marcus cried and blamed allergies despite it being November, and near the end of the night, I stepped outside alone onto the terrace. The city was glowing, traffic moving below like streams of red and white light, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel proud without immediately apologizing to the air. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. For a second, my stomach tightened, old reflex. But this one was different. It was a photo of a small repair shop in Savannah, my grandfather's old place. The sign faded but still hanging. Under it was a message from my mother. He would have charged them full price. I laughed so hard I cried. Across the country, Wexler Global still existed, but smaller, bruised, restructured, no longer floating above consequence. Walter had retreated from public life. Jasper was seen occasionally at charity events, quieter, thinner, trying to look humbled in photographs where nobody seemed fully convinced. Maybe he was changing. Maybe he was performing. Maybe most people begin with performance and eventually stumble into truth. I do not know. That is not my part of the story to finish. Nora Keene joined a worker advocacy board. Tomas Alvarez graduated nursing school. Rebecca and I built a partnership that actually worked. And me, I kept leading, imperfectly, stubbornly, with fewer illusions and better shoes. People still ask if I would do it again, knowing the cost, knowing the threats, the lawsuits, the sleepless nights, the way strangers online tried to turn my life into a courtroom where everyone got to be judge. I always tell them the same thing. I do not know if I would want to do it again, but I know I would not want to be the woman who stayed at that table. Because the truth is, sometimes the most expensive thing you can lose is not a contract. It is the small, quiet voice inside you that still believes you are worth defending. And once that voice goes silent, no amount of money can buy it back. So here is the part I still argue with myself about. Maybe you will too. Was I right to walk away from a deal that could have changed hundreds of employees' lives overnight? Was it justice when the Wexlers lost power? Or did the public punishment go too far once the internet got involved? Should one cruel sentence be enough to open the door on years of buried damage, or was that exactly the door that needed opening? I know what I chose, and I know why I chose it. But I also know life is rarely as neat as a headline. So tell me what you think. If you were in my place, would you have taken the money and demanded an apology? Or would you have walked out before dessert too? Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially if you have ever had to choose between opportunity and self-respect, because those are the stories people need to hear. And if this story made you think, made you angry, or reminded you of someone who has been forced to shrink in a room where they should have been respected, share it with them, like the video, subscribe, and come back for the next story. Because sometimes justice does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it starts with one person standing up, walking out, and refusing to use the back door.